Ridgid 18-volt power tools. Over the last 12 years, I've owned probably 25 tools, and used them on a professional level at least some of that time, and still have some of the older tools. One of the important things with the Ridgid line is the registering for the LSA, and it's sort of like alchemy that you have to dot your I's and cross your T's. But if you get everything right and go through the proper procedures and channels, you can have a pretty good warranty. You just have to mail the tool off and wait a while for them to fix it, so you have to have a spare if you're actually using the tools at a professional level. And one of the things that I've run into on the newer tools that I don't really care for is these fancy buttons for all the different modes. Because especially on something like an impact, where you have the thing clipped on your pocket and you pick it up, and of course the first thing you do is you bump the mode button, and whatever you had it set up for, you no longer have it set up for that, and you got to take a few seconds to rectify it. And usually it's whenever you're holding a piece up and trying to get a screw started and it doesn't want to spin it fast enough to start it, or whatever, or the piece of wood is super hard and it won't go in on the lowest setting, and just kind of makes life miserable. So I don't like those modes. I like the old simple, 3 position on top is fine, and that's something that I don't like. Had a few, got 2 different brushless grinders here, the older one, the newer one. Haven't really properly tried this one out. Used it a little bit in the shop, but haven't put it to work and properly used it yet. Got the older style impact. I forget what the torque rating is on this one, but they've got a newer, bigger, badder one that costs more, and this is fine for everything that I do, but they have other options as well. The circular saws, just got this one. It's the newest, latest one, and it actually spins at the same speed as or very similar speed to most corded 7 1/4 circular saws. I have, like, I guess you call it like a first generation 7 1/4 circular saw. This is the one that I actually carry in my truck all the time, and a fair amount of use out of it. I like it pretty well. It's not perfect, but still have the 6 1/2 inch circular saw. I never used this one a lot. I mean, I used it some over the years, but it just wasn't quite enough to actually do circular saw things. But I get a lot of use out of the new 7 1/4 ones. If you're ripping down a lot of lumber, there's just no replacement for a corded saw, and I need one just enough that I still carry a corded circular saw in my truck. The first generation of these 7 1/4 circular saws only spun at 3,700 RPMs, while this newest version spins at 5,600 RPMs. Just because it spins faster doesn't mean it has more power, but you do have better blade speed, so you get less tear out, and it's an improvement, but power wise it's not a vast improvement, but it is over the old 6 1/4 or 6 1/2. Have the SDS hammer drill. I think this is it's considered a 1 inch, which means that's what size hole it's supposed to be rated to drill with a standard bit. If you're using the core bit, you can drill larger than that, but it works fine. I had gotten one and melted it down after about a year and sent it in for warranty, and they sent me this one here back out, and it's identical to the one that I sent in. It wasn't overly durable, but it works nice. It's convenient. Have the cordless light, which has the option of plugging a cord into it as well, and that's pretty handy sometimes. If you're going to leave it plugged in somewhere a long time, you pretty much have to put a big battery on or a cord. Got the drywall gun, and it's got modes on it as well, which you always bump, but it's only got two. One where it spins whenever you pull the trigger internally, and the other one only whenever you have pressure on the nose. That doesn't bother me as much, but it still bothers me that you have that button that changes its characteristics. For batteries, got all sorts of different sizes. Got a 9 amp hour, which is nice for if you're doing a high demand project, and some older ones. These are I got a couple of 3.0 batteries they sent me as replacement batteries, because some batteries I'd had got old, and used the LSA to get some new ones. And like I say, I got a 6.0. Got a couple of the 2.0s. I sometimes use them on the impacts and drills if I'm doing light duty stuff, but they don't last very long if you're actually getting into stuff. I have an off-brand battery here. I've had a good experience with this particular off-brand battery. I have heard a lot of people who haven't had good experience with off-brand batteries. My money's probably on sticking with the regular batteries, but this one was an interesting one to try. And like I say, it's done pretty well for me. I've had it for several years now, and I think it's getting weaker, but it still does battery things pretty well. Have the multi-tool with a bunch of different heads, and one of the things about this is I got the metal shear, which comes in handy sometimes, the drywall cutout tool. It doesn't spin as fast as a regular drywall cutout tool, and as such it cuts a little slower, which unless you are a production drywaller isn't a big deal, but they do make a proper drywall cutout, dedicated drywall cutout tool. I might get one of them sometime. Have the right angle drill for it as well. It's kind of good for solving problems sometimes, getting into tight places. Have the jigsaw head, and if you're cutting bigger stuff with this, you will overheat the motor before you get too far into it, and ultimately if you're actually doing jigsaw things, a real jigsaw is what you need for the job. But this is good for odd stuff and small cuts and that sort of thing. But like I say, the motor is kind of minimally sized on this, and if you're using it a lot, you can overheat it. I've had a couple of these. I have a spare that's actually off getting fixed right now at the warranty center. Have a nailer. This one here is kind of on its last legs, but still works. It just doesn't always work when you want it to. my general thoughts are on the Ridgid line that it's a good quality line. It's made by the same company that makes Milwaukee and the same company that makes Ryobi. Their exact company relationship is all tied together. The big money is poured into the Milwaukee brand, obviously, and they do some kind of corner cutting stuff on the Ridgid line and progressively more so on the Ryobi line. However, the Ridgid line is almost as good as the Milwaukee line. It's just that they release all the latest engineering in the Milwaukee line, and then it filters down to the Ridgid line. And as such, you're not paying as much for the marketing. You're more just paying for the tools. They're a little cheaper as a rule, but not always. Kind of my thing with cordless tools is you should always run something different than what your coworkers run. That way your batteries are more likely to find their way back to your truck than their truck, or vice versa. And none of my coworkers use Ridgid, so that's worked out pretty well. Not overly brand loyal, other than the fact that once you have one kind of batteries, it doesn't make sense to have a different kind. And the tool is only about 10% of the actual work. Most of it is the operator, so get what color you like the best is pretty much what it boils down to.